Former climate activist Greta Thunberg's pro-Palestinian Flotilla violates military territory and gets arrested by the Israeli Defense Forces. Riots break out in response to Los Angeles ICE operations, which legacy media and Democrat officials falsely label peaceful protests. And in response, Trump enacts Title X and deploys 2,000 National Guardsmen and 500 U.S. Marines to Los Angeles. I'm Tony Kinnett, host of the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Monday, June 9th, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. Former high school dropout, climate activist, and now anti-Israel protester Greta Thunberg and her Freedom Flotilla were arrested by Israeli Defense Forces yesterday evening after violating blatant instructions to proceed to the port of Ashdod to unload aid for Gazan civilians.
The maritime zone of the coast of Gaza is closed to naval traffic as part of a legal naval blockade. If you wish to deliver humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, you are able to do so through the port of Ashdod via the established channels and distribution centers.
Instead, denying these orders, the flotilla sailed into the United Nations-approved blockade and were promptly arrested. Here's Thunberg claiming to have been kidnapped.
My name is Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
If her statements were true, this would be the first known kidnapping in world history in which the taken were allowed to keep their phone free of any restraints. Los Angeles spent Friday and the entire weekend in chaos due to the response from rioters and left-wing activists to the raids conducted by Immigration Customs Enforcement. These raids, which achieved the arrest of over 100 criminal illegal aliens and associates, included nationals from the Philippines, Mexico, and Ecuador, with crimes ranging from fentanyl and cocaine possession and distribution to violent sexual abuse and acts which we won't detail, and human and child trafficking. What follows is a brief timeline. The morning of Friday, June 6th, at around 9:15 a.m. Pacific Time, ICE, with support from the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and Drug Enforcement Agency, conducted a series of immigration raids at three primary locations in Los Angeles: Ambience Apparel in the Fashion District, a Home Depot in Westlake District, and another Ambience facility in South Los Angeles. Immigration Customs Enforcement arrested 44 individuals for immigration violations and one for obstruction. This was David Huerta, a Services Union California president. Governor Gavin Newsom contests the arrest of Huerta, suggesting that he was, quote, peacefully observing, end quote. However, video footage contests this. Friday afternoon, protests begin turning into riots at the Fashion District. Crowds blocked ICE vehicles.
It's a dangerous situation here, and it's really not going to do him any good to be standing there and possibly get ran over by agents. So here they are. They're on 9th Street now, rowing. Looks like
Wow.
At around 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time on Friday, protests began turning into riots as crowds blocked ICE vehicles, threw eggs and other objects, and shouted various anti-ICE slogans. Federal agents in riot gear used flashbang grenades, pepper spray, and less lethal munitions like rubber bullets and such to disperse protesters and clear a path for the detainee vans. In response, the rioters assaulted officers and damaged government property. In the afternoon and evening, protests escalated into riots over at the Edward R. Roybal Federal Building and the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown LA. Rioters blocked entrances, spray-painted anti-ICE graffiti, threw objects, to which finally, after being slow-walked by LA Mayor Karen Bass and Governor Gavin Newsom, the Los Angeles Police Department declared an unlawful assembly at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, issuing a citywide tactical alert. These officers used tear gas, rubber bullets, and pepper balls to clear the crowds. Over 1,000 rioters attempted to break into the federal building, and the Department of Homeland Security later reported slashed tires and various defaced properties. LA Mayor Karen Bass suggested that the raids sowed terror and disrupted safety, suggesting, quote, "We will not stand for this," end quote. Her implication that the community violent response was justified drew criticism from the White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. Governor Gavin Newsom denounced the raids as reckless and cruel to meet a, quote, "arbitrary arrest quota," end quote. On Saturday, June 7th, riots began in Paramount and Compton after reports of Immigration Customs Enforcement staging another raid, though the Department of Homeland Security denies that a raid occurred there at all. The rioters then blocked streets, set one car on fire, and threw rocks, bottles, and fireworks at law enforcement. One notable image includes one of the rioters riding around on a motorcycle waving the flag of Mexico in defiance of law enforcement. Later in the afternoon, the rioters began moving towards acts of domestic terrorism by filling certain bottles with what were suspected to be improvised firebombs or Molotov cocktails. 2 arrests took place for assault on officers, including one individual who allegedly threw a Molotov cocktail, which again would be an act of domestic terrorism. At 6 p.m. Pacific time, President Donald Trump authorized 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles to, quote, "address lawlessness," end quote, overriding objections from Newsom and Bass. Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii criticized the action, stating, quote, "This is not a bleeping insurrection, and we don't need the military to be mobilized as if there is a foreign army marching into an American city. Nobody should pretend they can't tell the difference between a volatile situation regularly and an invasion." Senator Adam Schiff of California said the Trump administration's calling on the California National Guard without the authorization of the governor is unprecedented. This action is designed to inflame tensions, sow chaos, and escalate the situation. If the Guard is needed to restore peace, the governor will ask for it, but continuing down this path will erode the trust in the National Guard and set a dangerous precedent for the unilateral misuse of the Guard across the country. This is objectively false. Multiple presidents, both Republican and Democrat, over the last century have deployed the National Guard with and without the use of a governor's request. After 1940, when Congress revised an earlier Defense Act, the National Guard was fully federalized under the Government Department of Defense, meaning that the National Guard can either be deployed at the request of the governor, which is under Title 32, or under Title 10 when the president invokes something like the Insurrection Act. For example, in 1992, the Bush administration invoked the Insurrection Act to restore order in LA after the widespread rioting following the acquittal of police officers in the Rodney King trial. While California's governor at the time, Pete Wilson, did request federal assistance, that was after George Bush had signed the Insurrection Act. A governor's permission is not necessary. Yesterday morning, June 8th, 300 National Guard troops of the promised 2,000 arrived in Los Angeles, staging outside the Metropolitan Detention Center to begin their mission of protecting federal buildings. Riots intensified in the early afternoon when 500 rioters faced the 100 federal officers and National Guard troops. Democrat Los Angeles City Councilwoman Eunice Hernandez openly incited violence against immigration enforcement agents.
They know how quickly we mobilize. That's why they're changing tactics. Because community defense works and our resistance has slowed them down before. And if they're escalating their tactics, then so are we. When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
CNN and other legacy media outlets suggested that the riots were peaceful protests.
We agree that if you're being violent, you should be arrested. You should be prosecuted. There is no disagreement on that. I think that's an effort that we can all say. But this is not what's happening. We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests, people that are there to protest.
Harkening back to the city-burning riots of Kenosha and Minneapolis of 2020, on Sunday afternoon, several of the rioters began calling several of the Waymo self-driving autonomous taxis to the staging line at the 101 freeway and then lit the autonomous cars on fire. Rioters threw various objects, including water bottles and rocks, where the officers responded with tear gas and other non-lethal munitions. Rioters also blocked US 101, violating federal law. Governor Gavin Newsom then urged protesters to, quote, "stay peaceful and not give Donald Trump what he wants," end quote, and also called Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's readiness to deploy Marines to assist the National Guard, which was also done in 1992, quote, "deranged." And as of last night, when the fires were beginning to whip up yet again and the riots were turning into a fever pitch, U.S. Northcom issued a statement regarding the protection of federal property and personnel in the Los Angeles area. relaying that in addition to the 2,000 National Guardsmen, 500 Marines from 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms are prepared to deploy status should they be necessary to augment and support the Department of Defense's protection of federal property and personnel efforts. Before you go, head down to the description and make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnettcast. And join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we take a look at some of the latest updates from Los Angeles, the individuals on the ground and who they're funded by, as well as some other stories which occurred over the weekend, including a little bit more on Kilmore Abrego Garcia and Simone Biles. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.